This is Tina from Punk Rock Saves Lives. We are, as you can kind of see, we are in the RV at the moment. It's like I'm trying to show Rob, and it's every case. We're in the RV. Yep. Somewhere in New Mexico, en route to Los Angeles, so we can be part of the Flogging Molly St. Patrick's Day event in 2 days, which is exciting. With me on the Punk Rock Saves Lives team, I have Dan and Jen. Go ahead and say hello, guys.
Hi.
Hey.
Perfect. They are both part of our mental health initiative pretty much, and Jen really helps me with anything on the fly. They're great individuals, and we're really lucky to have them. And then our guest today is Kim with Calling All Crows. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yes. So yeah, I'm real excited. I think this is going to be an important topic for us to dive into and organization for everyone to learn a lot about. So Kim, I don't know if you want to give us a rundown of what you guys do.
Yeah, I'd love to. So Calling All Crows is a nonprofit. We were started back in 2008 by a musician, Chadwick Stokes, and his partner, Sybil. And we do a lot of things. We're really focused on supporting feminist movement. So we run campaigns every few years. But the reason I'm here today is specifically our Here for the Music campaign, which is about ending sexual violence in the music industry. And that's for everyone, whether you're attending the show or working the show in some capacity. It's really about how do we make shows and festivals and the live music scene safer for everyone involved. And we'll be talking about that tonight.
Yeah, that's incredible. And thank you so much for joining us and for doing what you do, because it's super important.
Thanks.
I feel on a daily basis, I see a post from someone who had an encounter at some kind of music event or something that might not be on any kind of spectrum of it wasn't okay.
Yeah.
So I think the more we learn and the more we can talk about it openly, the better we can be together and work together to make it not exist or not acceptable.
Yeah. And so the work we do is definitely, a lot of it's on the prevention side, right? To say like, we don't only want to be responding to this, we want to be stopping it.
Right.
We also do response work to sort of like help support people who are forced to experience this. And when we talk about sexual violence, sometimes the first thing that comes to mind would be like assault or rape. But we're also talking about things all across the spectrum, harassment, catcalling, groping, like all of these different pieces that people might be encountering are a lot of what we're really trying to combat, and then help venues and festivals and artists and all these spaces be able to better respond if and when that happens, so that people can get the support that they deserve.
That's amazing. And what does it look like behind the scenes? I know that's a big part of what you guys do. You work with like festivals and the actual to make it a safer space.
Yeah, so we do a bunch of different things. So I'm coming to you live from Chicago. I'm on tour right now in a hotel room. So sometimes we'll do it out on like an actual tour with an artist. That's less typical. So I'll talk about a festival. So we're helping to train staff. So security staff, vendors, it's all the different, there's so many people who work festivals, volunteers, lots of different folks, to help them better learn how to identify harmful behaviors, and how to successfully intervene in a way that de-escalates and gets someone to safety. We're really focused on prioritizing the safety of the person being harmed. And then also thinking about like the safety of everyone else, right? Like it's not only that person that's affected, but it's everyone else that's witnessing it or could potentially be harmed as well. So training is a big part of it. We also do like policy consultation. So typically when a company has a sexual harassment policy, it only applies to their employees, because that's all that's like legally required to be in place. And the number of employees at like a venue or a fest is so tiny compared to the number of people are there, including the number of people working. Like most people working are contractors. They're not even covered under these sexual harassment policies that a venue or a festival might have. And so we're pushing to say, what's the policy for your attendees, for your guests, for your performers, for your vendors, for all these people, so that they can be safe and expect safety? And then what are the protocols you have in place to actually respond in a consistent and compassionate way, once you have this policy in place? So we do policy consultations, trainings, and then a lot around like signage. I know that feels sometimes basic, but when you think about culture change, it's like you have to get the message out there, right? Like a policy that no one knows about, or like these great resources that no one knows about don't help that much. So it's literal signage of like, here's where you get help, but it's also trying to put out these messages that help nudge behavior in the correct and the like healthier direction. So whether that's saying like, hey, have each other's backs, like look out for each other. We sometimes, it's like friends don't let friends harass, right? Like we're really trying to get at the friends, because it's hard, like saying don't harass people. Like if a sign fixed harass, like that wouldn't really work, but you can sometimes get people to like be embarrassed about their friends, right? And like to really try and reel in like their friends' behavior, even if they're not the one who would do it, or to look out for their friends, to know where to get support for your friend who might have been hurt. Because if you're the one who's being targeted, it's hard to remember like where you're supposed to go and get help. So if the people around you can help you out, that's really important. So we focus a lot on the bystanders and messaging to folks who are neither doing the bad thing or being hurt by the bad thing.
Yeah, I'm a big person. That's one of the things I definitely wanted to like talk about. I think we all don't know what to do to be a bystander. Like we all know it's bad. We all know there's like steps, but it's like the right. What do you do?
How do you stop it in a way that's productive?
Yeah, so we have what we call like the 5 Ds of bystander intervention. Bystander intervention is like a really big topic in sexual violence prevention. So this isn't like unique to Calling All Crows. I bet a lot of people maybe have been to a bystander training, but they're really amazing. If you haven't been to the full one, we have them online too on our website. But the idea here is that there's not a one size fits all solution, because it like context matters, but also like your comfort and skill and like how you show up in the world. All of those things matter. And so what we want to think about is like, what does the person who's being harmed need most in that moment? And like, what can you best provide in that moment? And so one of the 5 Ds is being direct. So this is the one most people think about when they think about intervention, right? It's like directly address what's going on. Hey, stop it, right? Like that confrontational approach. Sometimes that works. It especially works if you're like working, if you have a role, right? If you are security, if you are a supervisor, if you are someone whose literal job it is to like create safety, direct often makes a lot of sense. It doesn't always work if you are in a big crowd, and like that can sometimes be escalating. So even though that might be the first one we think of, it's not always the best if you don't have like a ton of skill around how to communicate that, or you don't know that if it's a stranger and you just sort of like come at a stranger, that might not work. So some of the other strategies are delegating. So delegating, asking someone else to go in. Oftentimes we think about delegating to like security or a supervisor, right? Like sort of escalating up a chain. That's fine. That's a possibility. You can also think about like who has social power there. So are the person's friends around, right? Like either the person who's being targeted, like are their friends around? Can you go and be like, hey, your friend looks like they're having a hard time? Or are like, is the person who's doing the harmful behavior, do they have friends nearby? Can you get them to be like, hey, what is happening here? Like go reel your friend in. So it doesn't always have to be to like an authority figure. It can sometimes be to just peers or to someone who you know would be really good at it, right? Like sometimes I get delegated to, even when it's not my job, just because they're like, you do this for a living, go, fly me free. So that's legit too. Like if someone has a different skill set than you, that works. Or a different identity, right? Like if there is like a young woman or a young girl being harassed and you're like a big dude, that might be escalating or like scary in that moment too. So finding someone who might feel a little bit safer to that person can sometimes be helpful as well. You can also create a distraction. That's our 3rd D. These are in no particular order, by the way. Yeah. They're not ranked in any way. So distract is exactly what it sounds like. It's like just move the conversation along or move the action along. So you're not directly addressing it. You're kind of coming at it sideways. I always have some like distractions in my back pocket. One is like, hey, do you know where the bathroom is? There's always a bathroom and someone always needs to find it. And like it gives someone just a moment, right? To like get out of that situation, especially I don't know, like think for a minute, like many of us is probably in a situation, it doesn't have to be harassment. It could have just been uncomfortable where you're like, I just don't want to be here, but I don't know how to get up and leave. And like, if only someone would come over and just like walk through or like ask me a question or do anything, if I just need an out, like you can be that out. Just ask where the bathroom is or ask someone to take a photo. If you ask someone to take a photo, they might have to like get up and move, which is really helpful because they're like physically moving away from that situation. And then they just get to continue leaving. The other thing that starts about distraction is sometimes the reasons we don't intervene is that we're not sure, like if we're reading the room right, and we're like, oh, what if actually this is mutual, or like I can't totally tell. Distraction, like if that was mutual, they will just keep doing whatever they were doing after you leave, right? Like you ask where the bathroom is, then they like go right back to it. But if it wasn't, right, like if your gut was telling you, hey, something's wrong, and you go over and you check in and they wanted that out, they'll take it. And like that's really powerful. All right, so we've done direct, delegate, distract. Our fourth is delay. So this one is called delay so that it starts with a D. It's checking in after the fact. The other ones are a little bit more intuitive in their naming, but delay, checking in with the person after the fact. This one's sort of underutilized in my opinion in just like daily life. So oftentimes, like when we're doing a training or something, we'll ask, you know, have you ever witnessed someone being catcalled? Like have the three of you witnessed someone being catcalled before? Just not necessarily at a show, like in life. Yeah. Have you witnessed someone go over to the person afterwards and say, hey, I saw that. Are you okay?
No.
Not by any means.
Right? It sucks. Like it's such an easy thing. You don't push bound. You don't have to become their therapist. You don't have to like, don't touch them. Like don't be up in their business, especially, I mean, if it's your friend too, whatever, like you know your friends. But just going over and saying like, hey, I saw that. Are you okay? Do you need anything right now? Is so powerful. And it's not just kind, and it is kind. You should do it just because it's kind. It's also prevention because it changes the tone of that space, right? When someone catcalls and we all say nothing, we just signal that that's okay here, that we do that here, and that is acceptable behavior. Even if you don't like didn't have the time to get to that person, or you like don't want a confrontation with a scary person who's catcalling, going and checking in signals that that actually wasn't okay to all the people who just witnessed that too. Even if the choice wasn't to go like follow up with the harasser, you can still check on the person that was harmed and reset the tone of that space to say like, actually, no, we care about this person and we want to make sure that they're okay. Our final, the other thing with delay, you can check in with the person who like did the harmful behavior if you know them. We really don't recommend it unless you know them, like you have an existing relationship, or again, it's like your literal job, right? Like, so if you're security and you like weren't there in the moment, but check in after, okay, that's fine. If you're just a stranger and it's not your job, it's just very unlikely to be successful and could actually get you hurt. So it's a better use of your time and energy to see if the other person was okay than for you to like go and try and have some sort of confrontation with the person when the situation has already moved on. Right. But if it's like your friend or your colleague or someone, some delay can be effective because you've like that it's less of a chance of it escalating in the moment. So if it's like, hey, I just saw that, like, really that wasn't okay. Can we talk about it? If that's like someone you have a relationship with, can actually be quite effective. The last one is to document. So documenting, it can be useful, but you also want to like sort of make sure someone else, like either try and do one of the other things first, or which can be delegating, right? Like send someone else in and then you can document. It would just be somewhat of a shame to like document something and not help out at all. But documenting can be taking photo, video, or actually just writing your account of it. Documenting things really, really, really important in the workplace. Sexual harassment as a concept is actually like an employment law concept. You can't like go to jail for sexual harassment. You can, I mean, sexual assault sort of falls under that category, which is different. But sexual harassment, it just like covers, we started using it in such a wide way, which is fine. But in an employment way, like documentation is really, really important, because there are legal pathways if you're working and are harassed, in a way that if you're just like walking down the street, there aren't the same protections. So that documentation can be helpful. But even outside of a workplace context, it can still be helpful. What's really important about documentation is remembering that it belongs to the person that was harmed. So like it never ends up on the internet unless they put it there, right? Like it's just not your story or yours to do anything with. That person just went through like a traumatizing event, and like not, sort of documenting and not giving it to them is another moment of taking their voice or their power away. And so if you're documenting, what you would want to do afterwards, go over, right, do that delay first. Hey, I'm so sorry. I wasn't able to get over there in time, but I was able to catch this picture of this person or a video of the event. Would you like me to send it to you, or do you want me to delete it? Realize that like that might feel invasive to someone. They might be a little bit put off by it. Delete it and move on. Like you don't need to make it a thing. Don't like get defensive. Don't whatever. Just be like, sorry, hope you're okay. It's deleted. Don't worry about it. Right. And just like move on with your day. It's okay for them to feel like it doesn't make you a terrible person. It's okay sometimes to like try and like swing and miss, take it with grace and like move along. And those are our 5 Ds.
Yeah, thank you. I feel that helped a lot, because I feel I always want to be the not sure what to do, and I want to go to like the direct, like let's just stop it. But the more like you were talking, the more I think you're right with it really goes down to friends. Friends can really, because we're all like social creatures. So typically, and I've seen it like in tons of just things in general, like even with us doing the bone marrow registry. If you get one person on the list, others will follow. That one person who says no, others will follow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so real. And it's like, it's friends. I mean, sometimes like the harasser is just like some person there on their own being weird and violent. It's actually not typical. That is like not the profile of a the profile of a harasser is all of us. It's just like someone. And it's not that, I don't want people to think that like everyone out there is violent. It's actually a small number of people doing harm over and over and over and over again, because we let them. And that's why we do focus so much on bystanders. It's like, who are the people who are standing next to that and going like, oh, like, I don't want to touch that. Like, that seems hard. And that's human and real, right? Like, I don't want to shame people for like sometimes looking the other way, because it's a practice, right? Like, it's hard. And once you start trying to like step in some way, it's gonna like, you'll fumble with it sometimes. I remember when I was like earlier on in this campaign and in this training, I feel like I was on extra high alert all the time because I was like, it's my job and I have to set the example. And I was out on this tour. I was with, I wasn't even working the show, by the way. I was like out on a tour, but like just on a day off going to a show. And we like saw this person. I was like, oh, we just like can't tell if that's mutual. They like, we don't know. And we like literally followed this couple like to a parking garage and watched them. And I was like, no, they definitely know each other. And it like and it was just, but we were so glad we weren't like that creepy. It sounds creepy. It was like, we also were parked in the parking garage, but it was better to do that than to like let that person all of a sudden be like put in a car against their will, right? Like that we just were a presence, and it became clear over time that their behavior was like so mutual and so like they knew each other super well. And it didn't seem that way when we like at the beginning.
Right.
And had it not been, sometimes just like the presence of people around when you're trying to do a bad thing is deterrent enough, like you don't have to be this superhero. We sometimes talk, one of the people I like learned from used to call it the bystander sweater, is to like just throw out the cape and put on your bystander sweater. It's an everyday thing. You do not need to like swoop in and save the day. Just like pop over, be like, sup? What's going on here? What's going on? Where's the bathroom? Take a photo. Like, are you okay? Like, it's like lower the stakes a little bit of what is on your shoulders to do. You're trying to like create you're disrupting this moment to give breathing room to the person who's being harmed. And hopefully that disruption is enough for them to get to their own friends. And of course, if it's your friend, then you get to stay with them for longer. But oftentimes, like, you might not be right next to your friend when this is happening to them, but you might be next to like a stranger that's being done to.
No, that makes sense. I really like that bystander sweater like analogy. I feel that the stakes are still high in like the case of things that are happening, but it's not like you are going out there. You're not putting yourself in some kind of danger situation by existing and being in someone's space in hopes that that's a bigger deterrent, because crowds are a thing.
Yeah.
When people are alone, where it gets super.
It is.
Not
And
good.
I oftentimes will train security that like them standing near a situation is one of the biggest deterrents there is. Like me standing near a situation, not a huge deterrent. Like whatever, they could like knock me over. And I don't look like I work, like we have a picture of what security looks like and it's not me. And so people aren't like, oh, this person is standing near me. But sometimes when I'm just like not sure if something is when I'm in a venue, it's just like, just go stand near that. And if it stops, it probably was not okay. And if it stops, it also could be that like people have a bad relationship to security and they'll just move, and that's okay too. But it doesn't always have to be a confrontation, right? Like sometimes literally just being near something is enough to make that behavior stop, because there's a witness to it and there's this like attention on what's going on.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I think my biggest takeaways is being there. And then something I've never thought of, going to someone, the delay part, going to someone that's been catcalled, right? That's never in my mind, because it's terrible for me to say, but I expect that to happen. On a regular basis, I expect a catcall of some sort to happen.
I was going to say the same thing. Like, my immediate response is, oh, that's so annoying. Or like, oh my God, that guy, or whatever. You know what I mean? But it's never like the first response is to never go over there and check on somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I think about like culture change, it feels giant and huge and hard to do. But really, it's like a lot of moments of a lot of people like changing the way we respond to things and saying like, actually, that's not okay. I know we come to accept it as normal, but going in and like disrupting that and being like, actually, today it's not. Like today in this moment for this person, we're going to see if you're okay.
Right.
Yeah. I like that kind of disrupting the way we think as well on the whole. Because we're used to seeing it. So it's kind of like we're numb to it. But the first couple times I've ever been catcalled, it was jarring. Yeah. There are moments I had, and I will never go in the O'Hare airport again, was the worst. Dan knows my story, was the worst experience I've ever had in an airport. But it was early morning. It was like 7 a.m. And this was this was February. This just happened. And a worker at the O'Hare airport was sitting down. Once I walked past, got up and followed me the whole way. Then started asking me questions, cornered me to see about, yeah, exactly. The moment I kept saying I'm married, he's like, but there's still a chance, you have to like that. And I'm like, nope, still married, right? I just sped off in the opposite direction, but I'm like, this stuff happens literally all the time.
Yeah, that's awful. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. And thank you for sharing that with us, because it's awful. It's just those things. People do violent things to other people. And it's like, we've just gotten used to saying like, oh, it's going to happen.
Right. And I think that's it, right? It was one of those moments where I told Dan, I was like, and I'm over it. I'm over this airport. But it wasn't, my brain was like, well, that happens sometimes. No, it shouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also like the other side of it too. Like so much of why we do bystander intervention is because it shouldn't be on the person being harmed in that moment. It is so much harder when it's being done to you to like have your wits about you to get out of that, because your body is being threatened. And even if you don't like consciously, like if you're able to rationalize yourself out of it later, oftentimes in that moment, it's a real threat that your body is picking up on. And it's, you can't, like, your brain is not in logic mode. It is in like mode, right? Like it's sort of like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fawn is like, I think fewer people have heard of fawn, but it's sort of like becoming friendly, like trying to like make that threat like not eat you. I don't know, that's brains. But the like, that is the typical response, and a bystander isn't having the same biological response. They can go over in a really different way. And that is like, we don't do self-defense classes at Colonial Crows. And some people love I'm not like hating on self-defense classes. They can make people feel really empowered, and I think that's amazing. But from like an effectiveness standpoint, the only self-defense classes that actually work are you have to be adrenalized when you do them. You like literally have to like get in bodysuits, which they do these. My friend's done some. They sound actually really fun. Like I don't think I want to have to do that, but it sounds wild that like you actually you like get attacked, and you learn how to, in a heightened state, defend yourself. So unless you're going to do like extreme self-defense training, which like you shouldn't have to do to exist in the world, you know, that the people I know who've done it like have jobs that put them in positions that they need that, then it doesn't work. And like we can't just rely on the person to be like, well, why didn't they say anything? Why didn't they do anything? Why did they just like take that? And you're like, because their body got them through that moment in the only way it knew how. And that's it. There's like there's no would have, should have, like, it's just your body and your brain turned off, and your body got you as safe as it could in that moment. And like, you need someone else to intervene to like help your body, like your mind get back in control.
Yeah. That's a good, there's, I had one pilot in my life, was explaining why they always do the safety protocols. He's like, okay, I need everyone to be quiet because it's actually important. If something terrible was to happen, your long-term memory is out of that window. And what we teach you right in this second is what you're going to call upon.
Whoa.
And I was like, and now I listen every single time.
And that's what it took.
Now I feel like I definitely don't. I literally just got off a flight like 2 hours ago, and I did not listen to the safety protocol. Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
But it was him saying those things. So it's like the importance of, as I kick my dog, I'm sorry. The importance of hearing this stuff over and over again puts it more in the forefront of our heads, especially in either any kind of situation. So like being a bystander, I know I'm an anxious person. So anytime there's conflict with the person I know, or I have the fight or flight, like for strangers. And it's a real thing, but like to hear it over and over, I feel like it gets it more ingrained to make it a choice that I could like push past regardless.
Yeah. Well, what you're saying too, I think it's really helpful to think about like what are the barriers to intervening. So some of the reasons like that people typically don't intervene, right? If they're witnessing something, right? Like if you don't see it, then that's why. But assume like you see something that's going on, right? Like what are some of the reasons that the three of you like wouldn't intervene if you saw some sort of situation that looked potentially harmful?
You guys? Anyone?
Or anyone that's viewing can put it in the comments too. Hi, Claire.
I think for me, it's situational and where I'm at. Like, if I feel like I'm not safe.
Yeah, your own safety.
Yeah, that's probably my biggest one.
That's a huge one. Yeah, I mean, we hear sometimes too, like, you're not totally sure what's going on, right? You're like, oh, I don't feel quite confident enough that like this is needed.
Very common.
That's my big thing. I'm like, am I overstepping if I do this thing? But I also don't want to go home and think about it all week that I like should have done something and maybe something bad was happening. It's like that nagging, second guessing feeling.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah. Yeah. Like or yeah, Claire's saying like it could also be in like you might be at just as much risk or even more at risk. It also sometimes like you could be worried about escalating it, right? That like you're like, I might actually make this worse. I don't know that I'm going to make it better. So those are all very valid reasons to consider. And that's why it's good to remember all of the Ds in your toolbox, right? Like if you're really worried that you're reading it wrong, think about a distraction. Think about delegating to someone who might know the people better so that they can get a better read on it. If you're really worried about escalating, same ones, right? Like you could create a distraction, you could delegate, you could, sometimes distractions are also literally like just like you could make a loud sound somewhere. I was doing a training for a bar, and they were like, you could drop a tray of glasses. And I was like, don't do that. Like that seems dangerous. You have a lot of broken glass to deal with. But like, I love the thought of like create just chaos.
Fair enough.
Yeah, like, but there are other ways to create a distraction that also aren't like putting yourself into the situation. Sometimes you can distract by like pointing in a direction, being like, what is that? Right? Like it can be as basic as that. I know that might feel silly, but if you're worried about going in there are like your feeling silly is like not that big of a deal in comparison to someone's safety and your own safety. And so if you are like worried enough about escalation, then like silliness might be the thing that gets you out of that moment. Again, if you're not the target of it, but if you're able to just sort of like distract away from both yourself and the other person, like just throw the attention in some other direction, that can be helpful. And again, you're not going to like do that if you're the target, but if you're somewhere nearby, you might be able to do that, and just like not worry that much about saving face. Start singing along loudly with the song that's happening. Like that would just be jarring, right? If all of a sudden someone was like screaming out of tune, like you're probably gonna look over. Or maybe they're singing beautifully, and that could grab your attention too.
Always
but whatever it is, you could be like some beautiful singer, just break into tune. But I'm not making light of it, but sometimes when you're feeling really activated or nervous, the way to get yourself out of that is to find some playfulness with it, because that can also help you calm, whether it's fear or anxiety or whatever it is, to just say, you know what, like me making like a little bit, like having some lightness to it, it's really disarming. You're unlikely to escalate something with lightness. And it can feel safer for you. Even if you feel silly, it might like calm that fear reaction you're having to saying like, if I go in, am I going to get hurt or am I going to make it worse? Is like, oh, I just made it weird. And like weird is better than dangerous. So like take the win, and like keep moving.
I like that. It makes me think of crime. I listen to a lot of Crime Junkie, a lot of it. On the road, it's been my go-to so I can stay awake. And their biggest thing is like, make it weird. Every time it's like, to stay alive, be rude and make it weird.
But it really, like, and again, like, especially if you're not the person being targeted, like, or it's like pretty, like the risk of that, it's pretty low. Like what's going to happen if you just make something a little bit weirder. And again, your goal always is to like prioritize the safety of the person being targeted or the person being harmed. So you don't want to make it weird for them, right? Like don't do that. But you can, like they're already feeling like nervous, but there are ways to just sort of like move the attention off of them and give them an out. And like that is your goal. And as long as that stays your goal and stays in your mind and in your heart when you're doing something, it will land differently. It's not going to land like you're making light of something. If you really have the intention and like that is what your goal is, it's probably going to come across that way. And if it doesn't and someone seems like upset, you can apologize, right? Like you weren't trying to, you can just be like, hey, that seemed like it was a crappy situation. I wanted to sort of get the attention off. Are you okay? Right? Like, is there anything you need? So if you feel like you misread it or you did it or like you sort of made it worse, use that delay, right? Like be a human and say like, are you okay? That seemed off. I was just trying to get the attention off of you. And that's it. Like, don't make a big deal. You don't have to like defend yourself, but that information might help that person to just like move along.
Right.
Nice. That actually, I think that's what's great about both of our nonprofits and what we do is it brings it out to the bands and it gets it more towards a vocal point for the bands to bring up, whether it be during their set or before. A band that's near and dear to me, Circa Survive, a post-hardcore band about in 2019. They're on a sidetrack. They're really big when it comes to mental health with their singer Anthony going through abuse and whatever it may be when it comes to recovery and getting to where he is. They're huge on carrying Narcan on them and posting about it and being very incredibly proactive. Back at a show in 2019, when they were doing not an acoustic set, but just no vocals during the set, just playing their music, there was a disturbance in the front, and their bassist could recognize immediately that it was a couple, but something was up. And so instead of stopping the show, instead of calling them out, he gently set down his bass, let the music still flow, didn't disrupt, didn't ruin it for the people that paid, but instead went down to the front row and said, "Hey guys, what's going on?" And pretty much, as you said, saw the signs, could tell his best, and pretty much just said, "Well, let's talk about it. You know, what are we gonna do? You know, let's take the time." And pretty much said, "I got all the time in the world. Let's do it." And said, "If now's not the time, I want to meet up with you after the show and see where we can take this." And that's above and beyond and absolutely unheard of, but amazing to see bands today recognizing the signs and being proactive as they can be. And even that's like more in the moment than one could even imagine, but incredibly heartfelt to be able to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think one of the things I want to highlight about that too is the like focus stayed on the person being harmed, right? Instead of like stopping a show, even if well-intentioned, it draws a ton of attention. Obviously, if it's like a medical thing and like people need to get into the crowd, like stop the show, like help medical get in. But when it's someone like, you don't need to draw attention to someone's trauma, because like I would not, like, I don't know, if I was being harassed and then the entire venue was staring at me, I wouldn't feel better. I just wouldn't. And I know I'm just one person, but it's the attention to go, and like not everyone who's on stage can walk off stage, but you can go into your mic, not the crowd mic, your other mic, and say something to your engineer, who can then get security. There are a lot of fast ways for people on stage to communicate to other people who have like way more freedom of movement, that aren't stopping the show or screaming into the crowd mic. And like you might in that case, like, right, like be able to walk off the stage and like go down. That is not everyone has like you know, like that moment, the entire, you know, so both of the, but that's amazing. It's like an incredible example of, yeah, like what your role allows you to do, and like who you are and the power you hold can really make a huge difference. That like that probably drastically changed that interaction.
Correct. And you make a solid point about how the drawing attention is the last thing you want. It's the last thing you would rather be not present at the show anymore than the person that's causing the disturbance, because it's just not worth the time anymore. You know, you're not in the moment, you're not enjoying yourself, and it becomes such pressure for no reason at all. And I know in that circumstance with them, they definitely they didn't want to bring in security. They wanted to make sure that, you know, what was going on. And it's always great that things can de-escalate, and that's a rare occurrence, obviously. But when it can be de-escalated in a calming manner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Jenny's asking a good question about we did talk about signage and posters and things like that, but maybe not in this light. She's asking about, putting up posters in bathrooms with drink names that you can order that mean different things, like calling a cab or walking somebody to their car or calling for help in some way. I always love when I see places that do things like that, because it's like we were talking about, a way to kind of not draw so much attention to a situation. But
Yeah. The one thing I'll offer about this is my own personal vendetta against these signs. Like, in order for messaging to work, everyone has to know it. And then once everyone knows it, code words don't work anymore. And so, like, what I've often witnessed is that these signs only go in women's bathrooms, assuming that only women get harassed. That, like, in order for, like, again, like, the concept of, like, make sure people know how to ask for help and be like, get the help they deserve. It's like the solution isn't to use code words. The solution is to, like, make it acceptable for people to ask for help and to know who to ask for help and to know that if they ask for help, that someone trained will actually ask for help. So I think, like, if you're someone who works in a bar or, like, is in a position to try and, like, create this sort of change, think about, like, what are the ways, like, that you can make sure that, one, if any signage is up, that you actually have people trained how to respond. Because when we've sort of looked into why don't people ask for help, right? Like, we did surveys of music fans who've attended festivals and concerts over a 5-year span. And an alarming number of people had experienced harassment of some sort. So we surveyed about 750, we surveyed about 700 people who had actually attended one of these events. Many people went through the surveys after not having attended, which I thought was very endearing that they went through the whole survey, but they hadn't gone to an event. I don't know what they were responding to, but about 700 people had been to an event. Those 700 people reported over 1,000 incidents. And there were people in there who hadn't experienced any, right? Like, many people are experiencing many types of different events. And we also didn't say, like, hey, how many times were you catcalled? They reported, like, multiple different kinds. So over 1,000 incidents of assault. And we dug a little bit more into, like, okay, well, did you report it? Did you ask for help? And fewer than 20% of people asked for help or reported, including, like, even telling a friend that it happened, or telling someone nearby, but, like, almost no one went to security or anyone that worked at the event. And we asked, like, okay, what would have felt different, right? Like, what would have needed to change so that you would have asked for help? And some of it was culture, right? Some of it was like, oh, I don't know, I'm just used to it. I thought I was supposed to just take that kind of, so it's like, collectively raising our standards for what kind of behavior we think is acceptable. But some of it was, well, I reported something in the past and I didn't get a good response. Or, I didn't trust that, like, I wouldn't just get ridiculed or be, like, sort of be told to, like, just suck it up, or to be really questioned about, like, what was going on. And so building up that trust, like, there was no reason that was like, oh, I just needed, like, a code word, or I felt like I needed some secret way. There wasn't trust. And, like, how do you fix that trust? How do you build trust between patrons and event spaces, or between the artist and the fans? And collectively, how do we raise the bar of, like, what behaviors we're accepting in spaces? And those two things are huge challenges to tackle, but that trust piece, like, signage can be part of that. But it's also about, like, really making sure that people believe that if they ask for help, they're going to get it, and that they deserve it. Like, they deserve the help in the first place, but it will be delivered if they ask for it. And those two pieces are overwhelmingly not true right now.
So we saw something really interesting happen over the summer. We went to the From Boston to Berkeley tour, or whatever it was called. It was Rancid, and the Dropkick Murphys. But when we got there, it was an outdoor venue that was really small, and lots and lots of people. And there were 2 police officers that really surprised us, and were walking around the crowd, literally, and, like, would just casually walk up to people that were, maybe intoxicated or maybe not in the best place or whatever. And they were just like, hey, can I do anything for you? And not in like a combative way or like a, hey, you're doing something wrong kind of way, but just kind of like, how can I help? And if you need something, this is where we're standing. And they just kind of went around and like made their presence known in like this way that was like, hey buddy, you know what I mean? like, hey, if you need somebody to talk to or you need to get away or you need help of some kind, this is where we are. And then Tim Armstrong said the same thing. Like when they went on stage, he was like, hey, we've got these friends at the Worcester Police Department and these EMTs from, here, and we have security from this place, and they're all here to have a good time, just like you are, but they want to help you. So if you need help, this is where to find them. And I was like, I don't think I've ever seen this happen before. Like, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, that repairing trust and that like giving that messaging from so many different angles too, right? Like from stage, from signs, from people themselves walking around. We work with Bonnaroo Festival, and they have we have folks who are counselors, like they're licensed counselors who are in the medical tents. But so much of what like Bonnaroo's like medical staff has done over the years, they wear like safety shirts, they're like t-shirts, they look a little bit more approachable, but they're often like sort of proactively walking around, and they're not security. They're not like a police presence, because a lot of people, rightfully so, do not have like great relationships with the police. And like many people don't have great relationships with like the medical community either, but like there's just a safety shirt and they're hanging out and they're like just walking around, and there's that proactive approach, but also that, to your point, like some of it is also about like, hey, do you need some water? Are you guys doing okay? Is there anything, like just that walking around and checking in on people. I'm out on tour right now with Claro, and we're running a trauma-informed helpline. And so we have the complication of it being COVID. Like there's a pandemic going on, so we have like competing safety needs. But some of it, like typically I would be doing a lot more walking around, but I'll see someone like, the other day I saw someone who was like sort of sitting off to the side. I just went over and was like, hey, are you doing okay? And they were like, yeah, my lower back's just hurting from like standing at a show. Been there, right? But like you don't know, right? And just like that, again, like that going over and being able to just like proactively check in on people and show, right? And I'm like there wearing a mic or like what do we call those? I had a radio on. It was clear that I was working the event. I was like, what is it called? I had a radio on. Like it's like, again, about that, like trying to build trust between the tour and the venue and the people who are there to show like, hey, we're just like checking in and like care about you, so that if something actually does go wrong, they might be more willing to ask for help because someone had already like sort of shown care for them earlier.
I like that. And I think that actually brings up a good way for us to kind of wrap up, but to like move forward in how we can be better and how we can help show trust in just regular people as well. So my first one is, if you wanted to do a little plug for anyone who's in the music community, Punk Rock Saves Lives will be signing this agreement, or however you want to say it better than me.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for that. So we have an anti-harassment pledge. And so it's on our website. We have a tab for Here for the Music, and it's our pledge. And it's not like a binding agreement, but it's a pledge to really, whether you're an artist or a venue or a festival or an organization that works within this industry, of like, what are the steps that you can take to commit to making like sort of where you have control and influence safer. And part of what's nice about it is that it like outlines the steps, right? So when you think about like, what can I do? It like literally is like, yes, I agree to doing these things, which is then becomes like a checklist, and we have resources to support those items on the checklist. So it is free to sign. It has we have a lot of resources that are free. We have some that are paid, but some that are free. Next month, April, is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So we're going to be pushing extra heavy on this campaign. But what a great time to have already signed and have these things in place so that come April, you can sort of like loudly and proudly announce that like, here are the ways that you're committing to be part of like industry and culture change around sexual harassment and sexual violence in our world.
Yes, and I will be posting that all this night, like continuing this week on, for anyone who's interested, who's in the music community, and literally any kind of way. I think it'd be really good. Yep, thank you very much, Dan. You're quick with your links, and I think it's just something for people to look at, and especially all the different bands that we work with who pay attention to these things that we do online. You should really check it out. Anyone, I think, signing this pledge is a good way to move in the right direction for trust.
Yeah, and so the pledge like sort of like can be that public commitment, and then the other thing, if you don't work in the industry but you are a fan, you attend, the pledge isn't really for you because it's much more organizational. But we do have a training that's online on our website that like, so that you've gotten pieces of the bystander training here, but can help. We have one that's for industry professionals, but we also have one that's for fans to really help build those skills around how to identify these behaviors. Because let's be clear, like not everyone can always spot it, right? Like I've gotten really good at spotting it, but not everyone knows how to like look out for this, because some of it is about building that skill. We didn't really talk about that as much today. But then it's also the skill around what to do once you've spotted something, and also just practice and like that ability to practice and build some confidence around it, because they're skills. You're not going to like read a book and then be better at it. Like you're going to have to stumble through it a few times before you start to get better. Thanks, Dan.
Yes, thank you, Dan. Especially because we are going to be promoting it heavily over the next couple of weeks. I am going to ask all of the people who volunteer with Punk Rock Saves Lives to take this training. Anyone in our community. I think it's important, and I think it's our way of being active for everyone involved. And that being said, we will meet up with him a month from now, a little bit past a month from now, since we're like at a weird day. So at the end of April, we will be meeting with Kim, and we'll be going over an overview of what that training looked like. So it'd be good to get that training done within this next month. So then we can jump on and have a more kind of like a deep dive, high overview of what that training was about.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being part of this conversation and for inviting me into your community to chat with you today.
Thank you.
Thank
We're happy to have
you
you.
so much. It's valuable. I feel the more we can talk about it, the better, and your knowledge and passion for it shows. So thank you so much for being here. Also, thank you, Dan and Jen, for jumping in today. I
Always.
appreciate the help. The last time I did one of these calls, I couldn't. They could hear me. I couldn't hear them at the end, and it got super weird. There was like a point where I'm like, I think you said it was nice to talk to me. So it was great. I appreciate you guys. Please check out all the links that Dan posted into this chat, or however that looks on your end. We will post more throughout this week, and I appreciate you guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care. Thanks for coming.